Okay, perfect. So once again, good afternoon to everyone. I know that we have busy schedules. It's a rainy Friday night, well, Friday afternoon, and so I know it's hard to connect, but thank you for coming. This is the 2023, technically 2024 Support for Artists and Creative Individuals Workshop. I will be your host this afternoon. Again, my name is Val. And before we begin, I want to let you know that we're going to go over information about. Did someone say something? Okay. We're going to go over the information about competitive grant programs, which are just the general information about all of the grants, and then we're going to dive straight into the Support for Artists and Creative Individual grant program. We encourage you to use the Q&A chat feature over the course of the presentation. We will end this workshop with a live Q&A by answering the Q&A questions in chat. And this presentation will also be recorded and made available on our website under the houstonartsalliance.com/workshop. So let's get started. Okay, so about Houston Arts Alliance. First and foremost, who are we? So Houston Arts Alliance, also known as HAA, is a local arts and culture organization whose principal work is to implement the City of Houston's visions, values, and goals for its arts, grant making, and civic art investments. HAA's work is conducted through contracts with the Mayor's Office of Cultural Affairs, or as we also refer to them as MOCA. HAA also executes privately funded special projects to meet the needs of the arts community, such as disaster preparation, research on the state of the arts in Houston, and temporary public art projects that vitalize neighborhoods. So that's a little bit about us. The Mayor's Office of Cultural Affairs, who once again we refer to as MOCA, oversees our work through a contract. Additionally, MOCA works to shape policy and practice in our sector. They advocate on behalf of the arts for essential resources and opportunities and help advance other city departments' arts and culture initiatives. So where does our funding come from and what is the resource? So we're going to go into a nice graphic created by our communications team. And this is a very simplified version of how we get funded and how the grant funds are distributed to HAA. So as artists and organizations, you may be interested to know that our public funding for the arts in Houston comes from the City of Houston through a hotel occupancy tax, also known as HOT funds, HOT. When someone books a hotel room, a percentage of the tax is dedicated to the promoting the arts and cultural tourism. This tax is called the hotel occupancy tax and is collected quarterly. Once it is collected, it becomes HOT revenue and is available for distribution. So again, hotel bookings turns into HOT revenue, goes to these three different sources, public funding, and then it's distributed into these three categories, which we will go into. So the HOT revenue allocations are determined by our contract with the Mayoral Office of Cultural Affairs and are split into three main groups. 74.5% is delivered in grants to the Houston arts community. 16.5% goes directly to Miller Outdoor Theater, and that's important for something that we're going to discuss later on in the presentation. And 9% is allocated to the Houston Arts Alliance for administrative purposes. Of the 74.5, it is allocated to grant making, and there's an even distribution here that you can see on the pie chart. 36% is allocated toward organizations with operating funds under 10 million, and for individual artists and creatives. 36% is allocated toward organizations with budgets over 10 million, and finally 2.5% is allocated toward Cities Initiative, a special grant program that is open to both individuals and organizations. So we're going to dive into our guidelines, and these are super important because this is the first step to beginning your grant application process. And this portion will cover information that's relevant to all grants applicants, and then we'll discuss the specific requirements for the SASE grant program. To start, the most important thing is to read the guidelines thoroughly. The guidelines provide dedicated instructions for each and all city-funded grant opportunities. By starting here, you will be able to see which grant program is right for you and what you need to be successful. It is expected that every applicant follows the same guidelines. Therefore, it is highly recommended that all applicants thoroughly review the guidelines. This document can prove to be extremely beneficial in increasing your likelihood of success. So please do take a look at these guidelines. And if you look at the PowerPoint, we have general information on pages 6 through 13. And you can find those on our website at HoustonArtsAlliance.com. So general eligibility requirements. Who's eligible to apply? Hopefully everyone here is eligible. So HAA staff reviews the following important criteria to ensure your eligibility and advancement to the panel stage. The applicants must provide official documentation demonstrating a physical address in the city of Houston limits. PO boxes are not accepted. And PO boxes aren't accepted because anyone, whether they do live inside of Houston or in Texas, can get one with a Houston address. So that's why. An individual applicant must be at least 18 years or older, which will be verified by applicant submission of an official state-issued identification card, passport, or other official documentation. To make sure you're not confused, if you're an applicant who is applying as an organization, you do not need to provide proof of age. But for our applicants who are individual artists and creatives applying for Let Creativity Happen or support for artists and creative individuals, you must be at least 18 years older and submit proof of age. Applicant's scope of work must have a clear public presentation component verified by staff review of that application. And we will get into the details about the public presentation component later on in the presentation. Applicants may only submit one application per grant program, per deadline, per year. If you would like to apply for multiple grants, the projects that you are proposing cannot be the same. You cannot seek duplicate funding for the same project. For example, you cannot apply to both Let Creativity Happen and Cities Initiative for the same project. Submitting the same proposal to both grant programs can possibly affect both applications' eligibility status. And to give a little bit more clarity on this point, because I know that it does become slightly confusing, especially with how dense it can be. You as the individual artist are able to apply for the Support for Artists and Creative Individuals grant, the Let Creativity grant, and the Cities Initiative grant. The one thing that could potentially make you ineligible would be applying for the same project and trying to get it funded through all three grants. So you are eligible to apply for multiple grants, not just the Support for Artists and Creative Individuals. Just make sure that the projects do remain different. I don't want to confuse anybody on that point. Organizations or fiscal sponsors must be tax exempt under the Internal Revenue Code section 501c3 with its fiscal year ending 2022 filed with the IRS. And applicants must meet additional specific eligibility requirements included in the grant program guidelines. So proof of headquarters or residence in the city of Houston. Within your application, your proof of headquarters or residency is paperwork demonstrating a physical address in the city of Houston limits. A physical address is verified by staff through the online council member mapping tool, which you can access through the guidelines or by Googling who is my city council member. Again, PO boxes are not accepted. This documentation must include your name and the address. So there's a couple of different resources for that. Acceptable documents that demonstrate proof of residence in the city of Houston for individual artists can include insurance, a state-issued ID or driver's license, a phone or utility bill, a current lease agreement, or an IRS tax filing. This document must be addressed to you as an individual. If you are applying as a collaboration or a collaborator, one artist must be the point of contact for the application and submit proof materials for that one artist. To that point, you can collaborate with other artists or individuals when you apply for the Support for Artists and Creative Individuals grant. But again, only one of those artists is going to apply to the grant, and that artist has to be the one that shows proof of residence within the city of Houston. Because if both collaborators apply for the same project under the grant, we will have to reach out, and it could cause eligibility issues. So requirements of grant applicants. After you have checked that you're eligible, it's important to ensure that your project or program has a public presentation component. One of the items required by all of our grantees and applicants is a clear public presentation. The public presentation can either be online or in person. So you do have the space to show that your exhibition or your artist talk or what have you in a virtual space or in a public space, thanks to recent events in history. The event must be open to the general public, benefit or be accessible to all City of Houston audiences. Public presentations may be ticketed, but they cannot exclude the public or limit who may be a member of the audience. If the event has limited capacity, everyone must have equal access or opportunity to attend on a first come, first served basis. As an applicant, you must identify the publicly accessible virtual platform in your application. Therefore, you should be able to elaborate on it. And this holds true for your public-facing component that isn't virtual. If you are submitting an application, it's really important for the public presentation component to be clear, because even though your vision and what you're trying to execute is very clear in your head, sometimes the translation from like your mind to the application may not be clear. So whether it's virtual or public, please make sure that that is clear in your application so that the panelists are able to review it and clearly understand what you're going for. So to give you an idea, all HAA grants can help support art exhibitions, film screenings, music, dance, and theater performances, online art projects, literary readings and publications, local arts festivals, and other activities. This isn't an exhaustive list, so it's up to you to make it clear in your application what the project is. Be aware that any applicant whose primary programming takes place in K-12 schools or is geared towards the youth must also have a public-facing event that is open and accessible to the general public of all ages and groups. And lastly, if you are applying for public art proposals that require city permits or approvals, such as publicly installed art, street closures, sound amplification in public spaces, or murals, as the applicant, you will be solely responsible for securing the necessary permits, permissions, insurance, and approval. We mentioned this because we, as Houston Arts Alliance, don't assist in getting those permits, and that is something that we do want you to be prepared for coming into the application process and in trying to execute whatever it is that you have in mind. So HAA grants may not support the following, and we'll briefly run through these items. So any activities taking place outside of the City of Houston cannot be funded, and any activities at Miller Outdoor Theaters cannot be funded because they are also hot funded. If you remember at the start of the presentation, we had this really beautiful pie chart that shows where the hot funds go to. And so this is why I said it was important at the start. So if you have some sort of activity at Miller Outdoor Theater, that would not be able to get funded by HAA grants. The activity must take place within the grant term. Any activity outside of the grant term will not be funded or will result in returning funds. The grant term will be outlined in the initial contract whenever we do send it out. So you will have a very definite start date and end date that will show when your grant term is. So do not worry so much about the time frame of that. You will know when you have your contract. Also, grants made directly to K-12 public, private, or charter schools, colleges, or universities, including collaborative projects or programs, are not allowed. There must be a public program accessible to a general public put on by an educational entity. That program cannot be exclusive in nature. For example, only for youth participants. Funds cannot be used toward re-granting funds, for example, award ceremonies, cash prizes, or fundraising activities. Here's the last couple of things that may not be funded. Multiple submissions for different applicants for the same program and multiple submissions to the same grant program from the same organization or individual applicant are not permitted. For-profit entities may not apply directly. For-profit applicants may apply through fiscal sponsorship with a 501c3 organization. And lastly, faith-based organizations cannot use funds toward primarily religious purposes or any activities that exist as part of a religious sermon or service. Multiple submissions from different applicants for the same program are also not permitted, as we've stated a couple of times already. Other requirements. So we do ask for the W-9 and ACH forms in your applicant profile. This helps the grants division and our finance team process payments seamlessly when decisions are approved. So we do have a pretty lengthy process that comes after you've been approved and after we've had those signed contracts. So once you sign them, it does typically take about 2 weeks to get you your first disbursement, and having the W-9 and ACH forms makes that much faster. It makes it easier for the team to send out payments, and it makes it easier for you as the artist to begin your project. So that's why we do ask for the W-9 and ACH forms upfront. And again, for fiscally sponsored projects, a copy of the fiscal sponsorship agreement will need to be uploaded. This one isn't so much as relevant to the Support for Artists and Creative Individuals grant, but it is good to know if you are an artist or form a part of another organization. So work samples. As part of your application, you can also upload a maximum of 10 work samples. These can be 5 image or audio files in addition to 5 PDFs with links to YouTube sites or other websites, images, or manuscripts. This section is meant to demonstrate the excellence in the proposed project or the applicant's previous or current body of work. So when you are submitting the application, please show us and the panelists the type of work and the type of experience that you have. This is the space for you to show your previous work, projects that you've executed, and it's really sort of a way to archive what you've done and show what you can do. So use all of that space, whether it be PDFs, links to previous work, videos, music, whatever your art medium is, please show the best of what you have here. That's why we have that space for you. So grants portal, where to apply. We're going to quickly go over how to apply with our nifty HAAsmartsimple.com application portal. So once you're ready to apply, go to HAAsmartsimple.com. You're going to, if you already have a profile, you're going to log in. Otherwise, you will register, and you will register as an individual applicant because this is for the Support for Artists and Creative Individuals. When you are in the grants portal, click on organization profile for organizations or my profile for individuals to upload required documents and update your profile. Again, you will be this nice blue circle with my profile as you are individual applicants for this grant. Scroll down for funding opportunities, click on apply now to begin an application. As you can see here, we have a nice big yellow circle. This is SASC 2021, but you would be applying for SASC 2024. You click on apply now, and then the application opens. So who uses the budget table or the budget template? So Support for Organizations, which is SO category 2 applicants with less than 1 year of financial history and or 501c3 IRS tax exemption, all fiscally sponsored applicants, and all festival Support for Artists and Creative Individuals, Cities Initiative, and Let's Creativity Happen applicants. So in short, if you are here today to apply for the Support for Artists and Creative Individuals, the SASC grant, you will be using a budget template, and we're going to go over how to use that. So we're going to use the income and expense table to report the full cost of your proposed arts and cultural programming. If recommended for funding, the award amounts will follow the guidelines for the specific grant program to which the applicant applies. And here's like a sneak peek at how your budget table will be looking. In this section, you will add all of your funding sources, including the amount you are requesting in your grant application. This is for the income section. In row 1, contributed City of Houston, list your request under the amount of request column, which would be right here. In rows 2 through 9, you will list other funding sources under the other funds column. The columns will automatically calculate the sum, which will appear in the row labeled total, which will be right over here, total. Something that I do want to mention, which is a common problem for people as we're going through the budget table, is that even though the spaces here in this PowerPoint are blank, whenever you are filling out your budget table, any amount of requests or other funds that would otherwise be left blank should have a 0. If these spaces do not have zeros, the budget table won't recognize the submission and will not allow you to submit your budget table. If you do come across those issues, please feel free to reach out to the HAA grant staff and we'll remind you about that. So no stress, no worries. We're just here to inform. For the expenses section, in the amount of request column, you should only list the expenses that will be covered by the city grant. Be sure to review the what may not be funded section on pages 9 through 10 of the grant guidelines to ensure only eligible expenses are listed under this column. In the other funds column, you should also list all other expenses that will be covered by other funding sources. The columns will automatically calculate the sum which will appear in the row labeled total. So again, it will automatically do the math for you for people that are not good at math like myself. And the same holds true for the expenses section, guys. These blank cells should have 0 if they don't have any other number associated with them. If you do not put 0 in all of these cells, it will also cause you to not be able to submit your budget table. But again, should you forget, as these applications may be a little stressful, you can always reach out to the grant staff and we'll assist you in getting that through. And the description column, which is in both the expenses table and the budget table. So use this description text box in each row to provide additional details about the income or expense line item. So the description box will basically just allow you to put what the expense was for, whether it was artist fees, venue, rental, or other supplies that you might have that you want to incorporate into your budget table. So specific expenses that are not permitted, we're going to go over these because some of these are quite common when budget tables are submitted. So travel outside of the city of Houston is not permitted. Deficits, loans, interest on loans, fines, penalties, or cost of litigation. So you cannot use your grants to pay these things off. Training included but not limited to classes, conferences, or workshops. The purchase of equipment exceeding $250 except for rental costs directly affiliated with the funded project. So these $250 would not be limiting, let's say, the rental of a venue space, because we do know that venue spaces can be quite costly. So that would not be limited by this line item. The capital expenses, which are expenses that would live beyond the project term. And finally, meals, refreshments, and/or catering expenses. All of these things are not funded or cannot be funded by our grants. Okay, so once your application form is complete and we take everything into consideration previously mentioned, you hit submit. Once the application is submitted, HAA staff will review the applicant's eligibility and application completeness. We have a curing process that allows for some items to be fixed in the application. Eligible applications are then forwarded to a peer panel to be scored and ranked. Once we have the peer panelists' recommendations, applications are forwarded to the HAA Grants Committee, which reviews and votes to assure the process is being followed with integrity. Then those recommendations are sent to the HAA Board of Directors for approval. They do not vote on the grantees or the amounts or make any sort of adjustments or changes to the recommendations. They are simply auditing whether or not we follow the process as it's been publicly communicated and shared. Once recommendations are approved by the Board of Directors, they get forwarded to the Mayoral Office of Cultural Affairs for final approval by the mayor. The recommendations are not final until the City of Houston process is complete. So let's take a look deeper into the HAA staff review process. So how we review grant applications. All application fields must be complete to be considered for funding. The curing process allows for some items in your application to be fixed. These items are missing or incorrect documentation. You will be notified via email and will have 4 to 4.5 business days to cure your application through the support desk. For individual artists, some of the items that can be cured include blurry or invalid proof of age and outdated proof of residency documentation. And for organizations, that includes outdated proof of headquarters. This is an improvement from previous years in which you typically only had 3 days to be able to cure your application should something like this arise. And full disclosure, we typically start the curing process on a Monday around noon, and we typically have the curing process closed by Fridays at 11:59 p.m. So you do have 4 to 4.5 days. So do be on the lookout for those emails or notifications should your application be eligible to be cured. Keep in mind that applications will not be reopened to correct narratives, work samples, responses to questions, or budget tables. Failure to submit curing items on time will result in the ineligibility of your application, and it will not be considered for funding. So when we talk about the curing process, we truly only mean curing in the sense of proof of age documents or proof of residence documents, which would be some of the things that we need in order to move on to the panel review process. Like I said, you do have the 4 to 4.5 days. And whenever you do receive the email or notification, you will know what day you need to submit your documents by and what time. Additionally, should you submit a document during that curing process, and if we still find it blurry or it still doesn't meet the requirement for proof of age or proof of residency, you will be able to submit your documentation so long as it's within the original curing time period. So it would still essentially be due by Friday at 11:59 p.m. So don't fret if we send you another notification asking for a follow-up documentation. So let's say that we've submitted the application, you're done with the curing process and everything is fine. We move on to the peer panel. The peer panel has the largest job in the review process because their score determines the funding ranks. HAA uses the competitive peer review process to score and rank eligible grant applications. A long-time national practice of engaging community representatives with arts expertise to make critical decisions about the public funding competitions. The process removes HAA staff and board and their immediate family from the evaluation of grant applications except for objective scoring sections outlined above. Panelists include a diversity of skills, self-identities, and experiences, which ensures that they can properly assess merit in each one of the applications. HAA seeks to represent the various Houstonians and visitors that our cultural community serves. We seek panelists locally, regionally, nationally, and sometimes globally. We do invite anyone with arts experience to be a panelist. You can visit HoustonArtsAlliance.com HAA panels to learn more. And if you are here to be a SASE applicant, we also do invite you to form a part of the peer panel process. It gives you some insight into how people look at applications and what they're looking for, and you're also serving and giving back to your community. So if you are interested in the peer panel review process and in applying to become a panelist, please reach out to the grant staff. And if Mo Munley is still on the call, you can directly reach out to her, as she is our main point of contact for that.
I am, and I'll drop my email in the chat for everybody.
Thank you, Mo.
Yeah.
So we are past the panelists. They have scored, ranked, given comments, and given their recommendations. So now we move on to the board. They do not vote on the recommended grantees or award amounts. Once the recommendations are approved by the grants committee, they are sent to MOCA. So again, the HAA committee and board do not vote on the recommendations given by the panels or change the grant amounts. They are only there to ensure the integrity of the process and to make sure that everything was followed through during the panel and review process. So this is just another step prior to it going to MOCA, the Mayoral Office of Cultural Affairs. So after MOCA reviews the recommendations, the mayor signs off on each and every one of the applications that have been recommended by the panelists and by the HAA board and committee. And once he signs off of them, all awards are final and notifications will be sent out. So finally, the part that everybody's been waiting for, and that's more specific to everybody in the room, we're going to talk about the support for artists and creative individuals guidelines and overall application process. From this point on, I will be referring to it as SASE. And so let's begin. So the SASE 2024 term length. The SASE grantees have 1 year to fulfill their grant agreement, having the public presentation and or the completion of the proposed project. The grant contract dates. The grant term begins January 1st of 2024 and ends December 31st, 2024. The final report, which we will go into more detail about that later on in the presentation. After the grant term has ended, the grantee has 30 days to complete their final report due, which is January 30th of 2025. And just so that you know, it's called SASE 2024 because even though you're applying for it in 2023, the summer of 2023, the grant term and the grant disbursement does begin in 2024. So it's a little bit confusing, but it also makes sense to a certain degree. So the SASE program overview. SASE is dedicated solely to individual artists from all artistic disciplines and provides up to $15,000 for projects that stimulate the creation and presentation of new works of art or completing works currently in process. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel, guys. If you do have a current project or a current thing that you are working on, you can use the SASE grant to continue that work. Okay, so SASE is also the space for artists who work in an artistic capacity with nonprofit organizations, such as artistic directors, executive directors, lead artists, resident artists, and conductors must apply with a program that is independent of their organization. For collaborative art programs, one artist must serve as the applicant for the project and must meet eligibility requirements. A collaborator is defined as someone who is a co-owner of the program and a generative part of the team. Subcontractors are not collaborators. So artists who work in an artistic capacity with nonprofit organizations may only apply for a project that is completely independent of their organization. And we've already listed out the different people that could be a part of that. And collaborations, one artist must serve as the lead applicant for the project. Contract and fees will be paid directly to the lead applicant. Hiring artists or creatives to execute the proposed idea of one individual does not constitute a collaboration. Now to go back to the review criteria specific for SASE. So the review criteria is going to be broken up into these three different portions. The artistic programming, the applicant demonstrates artistic and cultural expertise, has documented past successes and demonstrated ability to execute proposed activities, clearly defined public programming that is imaginative, innovative, and relevant for Houstonians and visitors, and work samples demonstrate artistic vision and ability to execute the proposed activities. The public benefit portion. Applicants demonstrates effective strategies in marketing and audience engagement that are inclusive, publicly accessible, and seek to engage all Houstonians and visitors. The proposed activity is feasible in its potential to share work with an understood and defined audience. And the stewardship of public resources. Applicant demonstrates the ability to steward public resources. Details show appropriate preparation to complete proposed activities, and the budget is feasible and demonstrates investment in artists and local talent. And we're going to go into each one of these with a little bit more detail. So for artistic programming review criteria, the detailed program proposal, description of the proposed event a description of the proposed event will be outlined in detail, and the following questions should be considered as you're going through this. What is the concept? Be descriptive. The more detail, the better. Include details such as size, scale, time, form, space, and etc. What makes your proposed work unique? How does it further explore your practice? Does the work push any boundaries or use art in any distinct ways? If your program requires city permits or approvals such as publicly installed art, street closures, sound amplification in public space, etc., please address this in the description of your work. Why is this event appropriate for this work? And lastly, how do you measure success? Try to think beyond the number of people who attend or view your work. What are the goals of your program? So please do keep all of these in mind as you're talking about your project proposal. We also want a description of your artistic history, and these are questions to think about as we're going through the section. How does this work fit into your overall creative artistic practice? Describe major activities or achievements that you've achieved in your career, or what are the major activities or achievements in your career? And finally, discuss any previous experience you may have had with similar works. Include information on collaborators if applicable. So this is the space that shows panelists what you have done and how your artistic history and career have led you up to want to create this project. So please do keep that into consideration as you're proposing your projects. This isn't to say that you should not delve into something new within your artistic career or discipline, but it does help put things into perspective and give panelists more context as to what you have achieved. For public benefit criteria, the community impact. This is this description of how community will benefit from your work, the outreach and marketing strategies that you will implement as you go through the project. So a couple of things to keep in mind. How will you engage your intended audience, and what will they experience? How does your work serve, respond to, include, listen to, and reflect the community? And are you engaged in any community partnerships in the production and presentation of this project? So as these are public funds and funds that are coming from the city of Houston, this is something to keep in mind, that you do want to sort of give back to the community and show the widespread and or very specific impact that you're having within the different parts of the city of Houston. Program variety. So this is a yes or no question. Does your proposed project foster artistic expression in and reflective of historically underserved communities defined by race, culture, sexual orientation, gender variance, or nationalities? again, this is a yes or no question, so it's something to keep in mind as you're going through the application, whether your project does do or affect any of the defined communities. The program location. So accessibility of arts and cultural programming is a key value of the City of Houston arts investment priorities. Please describe how you have adapted your programming in light of everything that's happened with COVID-19 and current things that are going on in the Houston sphere. In what ways do you create access across levels of ability? Give a description of accessibility of arts and cultural programming as it pertains to your project. So a couple of things to keep in mind. In what ways do you create access across levels of ability, lived experience, geography, and other diversities? And what non-traditional spaces, venues, or other platforms are you considering? For the overall proposed project timeline and budget table, describe the overall proposed timeline for your program, including the expected timeline for development, execution, and final public presentation. Include details about the budget and a short description of how city grant funds will be used. This is your time to appeal to the logistics person in the room that will be one or many panelists that are going to look at your project and think about how will they execute this? What are their plans for the next couple of months while they are in their grant term? When are they going to start to develop it? Have they already started reaching out? And when will the project happen? So this is your time to really create a skeleton of your project, and it might also help you in executing your project by having things in a concrete fashion. So this is another yes or no question, which is artist fees. The applicant demonstrates investment in individual artists and artistic practice through the payment of artist fees, whether that be collaborators, contractors, etc., as indicated in the program budget. If this criterion is met, all 5 points are awarded. If it is not met, 0 points are awarded. And to this point, most, if not everyone in this room are artists, and you have your own artistic disciplines and practices. If you are the main person that is doing this project, or you have other collaborators, you can also pay yourself out with this grant money. So you as the artist, you have the ability to use the grant funds to give yourself an honorarium or some sort of stipend, as well as paying out all other artists. So if you are paying yourself or other artists, then this is a yes. And you should be, as we want artists to have recognition and have some sort of reward for the work that they do within the community. So this timeline is a very condensed and easy way to view how the grants process occurs. And so we'll start from left to right. So the grant opens June 26th, 2023. It will close July 30th, 2023 at 11:59 p.m. Once the grant closes, no application material will be accepted after this date. From July 31st to August 18th, HAA verifies application eligibility. And around this time, the curing process also occurs. August 23rd through September 15th, 2023. Panelists review and score applications independently. September 18th through October 4th, 2023, panelists convene to review and finalize award recommendations. October 5th through October 20th, 2023, award recommendations packets are prepared for subsequent approvals. November 2023, the HAA Grants Committee and Board reviews award recommendations. December 1st to the 14th of 2023, MOCA reviews and approves award recommendations. And finally, around December 14th through the 29th, the grants are awarded and grantees are notified via email. This means that everybody who did apply are going to be awarded, regardless if they were approved and were awarded, whether there was some sort of eligibility issue, or whether they were not awarded. Everybody gets notified around the same time, as this timeline shows. And not all dates in the timeline are set in stone other than when the application opens and closes, because there's a lot of things that are going on. But you can expect December 14th through December 29th to be more or less around the time when you will get notified about application awarding or otherwise. So after acceptance, this is a quick overview of how things pan out. So contracts, once you sign your contract, the grants department sends your first payment to the finance support department. The support for artists and creative individuals, the SASE grant, is a cash in hand model. So the processing of the first payment occurs 2 weeks after you've submitted your contract, and you will get 80% of your total award amount once the contract is signed. And that's once the contract is signed, you will get that after 2 weeks. So the final report, which is the final step of the entire process, from grant start to grant end, you submit anytime over the course of the grant term, showing that the documentation that the project has been done. So you can submit it earlier in the grant term. So your grant term is January 1st to December 31st, 2024. If you complete your project by, let's say, March, like early March 2024, you can submit the final report. The final report consists of work samples, submission to the cultural events calendar, and other things that can be found in our guidelines. And once the final report has been submitted and approved, you will get the last 20% of the grant as outlined per your contract. And I guess I skipped ahead to step 4, and that the second or final payment, the remaining 20%, comes after the approval of the final report. And this is sort of a breakdown of what that final report looks like. So the grant term is 1 year from award notification. The final report is due 30 days after the end of the grant term, which would be January 30th, 2025. Long time from now, something to worry about as the date closes in, but something to still keep in mind regardless. So you have work samples, which would be images, links, or videos as documentation of the event occurring. The financial report, which is a list of expenses that are eligible for funding and were covered by your HAA grant. The financial report does look very similar to the budget table that you submit when you are applying for the SASE grant. We do not ask for the submission of receipts, but we do ask that you keep those receipts that were used during the project for at least 3 years in case auditors ask us to audit you or to ask for those receipts. So please do keep those on hand for 3 years at least. Submission to the cultural events calendar. Post your event at submit.haatx.com. This is an opportunity. It's a requirement for the final report, so please do submit to it, but it's also an opportunity for you to be able to market to a larger space. It is free marketing, and the cultural events calendar has a lot of different people that view it, and it has a lot of traffic, so please do submit there. And finally, the marketing materials. You're going to include the City of Houston seal and the credit line to credit the city, and funder found at haatx.com logos, which just means that you would have the City of Houston logos and the HAA logos on any marketing materials that you do use throughout the process. You can find the final report at haatx.com/final report. You will find what is the final report, the key guidelines for preparing a final report, and how to submit the final report. And if you are a more hands-on person or need somebody to walk you through it, you can also call or submit a ticket to the HAA grants team in order for assistance with the final report. This is a virtual workshop schedule with SASE being the final one that we've had. So congratulations, everybody, for having sat through me speaking for roughly 50 minutes on a Friday afternoon, a rainy one at that. And so now we do have our Q&A session that's going to occur. So let's start.
Yes, and we have a lot of folks who have been asking a lot of really great questions in the chat. I'll scroll up to the top. And I can read off a question, and Val, Mo, Sharif, myself, we all can just sort of partake in answering whatever question speaks to us. So the first question from Sonia. Regarding the virtual platform requirement, would my personal website be considered acceptable as a virtual platform to showcase my work and meet the grants requirements? I don't mind answering that question. So here's the thing with someone using a digital or online public presentation. So Val just went over the final reporting requirements. So I would keep in mind those final reporting requirements when you're thinking about your public presentation. So if you were doing a personal website, how would you market that as an event on the cultural arts calendar? Is there a day that you're asking everybody to join and look at your website? If so, because you're required to put like an event date on the cultural events calendar submission. So what date would you include, and what sort of like presentation component would be a part of this website unveiling? Secondly, I would think about the work samples. So if you're doing a website, how are you going to capture the public presentation that took place as a part of your website debut? If you feel like you can think of a public presentation that would meet the final reporting requirements, I don't see anything wrong with using your personal website as some sort of public presentation component. You just might have to get creative in terms of what that would look like to make sure that you're in compliance with the final reporting requirements. Does that make sense, Sonia? Great. Next we have Elisa. Part of my project proposal involves hiring writers to develop the script, actors to workshop it, and 2 to 3 producers to tackle marketing and financing the production process. As long as all of these artists live within Houston city limits, do their stipends fall under what is acceptable to use SASE grant funds for?
I can answer this one. So all of the listed individuals that you have in this question, you can use the grant funds to give them stipends or to pay them out. So technically, and this is like a technicality, and it also falls into like the adjudication process of the panel reviews, you could potentially work with people outside of the city of Houston, but we do encourage, and the panelists are also looking for the funds to circulate back into the city of Houston. And so you can fund these different individuals that are within the city of Houston. And so, yes, it is an acceptable use of your SASE grant funds.
And I wanted to double check that paying producers to handle financing a film wouldn't be kind of shaky as far as like fundraising, or is that okay?
Yeah, that's okay. Your event, when we say fundraising is not allowable expense to be covered, it's more so an event that is based in raising funds for an organization. Okay. Right? So if you were doing some sort of like fundraising event to accumulate, funding for a project or for an organization, that would not be allowable.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. Next we have Marshawn. Can I create a project that will feature several artists in Houston? What if one of those artists apply for something totally different? Does that interfere with my eligibility?
So no, Marshawn, that does not interfere with your eligibility. You can definitely apply for the SASE grant. The only thing that would interfere with eligibility, say that you are applying to create a sculpture, you can be the only person that is applying to create that sculpture under the SASE grant for that term. You can collaborate with other artists, and we would love to see collaborations. We're not against it, but only you would be essentially the primary artist that would be applying and that would be handling the cash funds. And you can have that secondary artist apply for the same grant, the support for artists and creative individuals, so long as he's working on a completely other project, or they're not double dipping. So you both can apply to different to the same grant, so long as they're different projects, and your eligibility should be fine.
Thank you. That answers my question. Thank you.
Of course.
All righty. Next question we have is from Caroline. Caroline asks, would an expense of a studio working space be covered in expenses if we don't have a space currently?
Yes. So you can use the funds to rent out a space or to work from that space if you don't have one currently. That is definitely a good use and a proper use of the grant funds.
Awesome. Next, we have another question from Sonia. It's a few questions, so maybe I'll break it down and we can answer them one by one. The first is, am I eligible to apply for this grant if I operate a creative business that aligns with the proposed work? Should I separate my small creative business from my grant proposal when it comes to linking my website, shop, and multiple social media accounts?
Taylor, do you mind stepping in for this one?
Yeah. So if you operate a creative business, if you're applying to support for if you're applying to support for artists and creative individuals, you would be applying as an individual, not as a business. So businesses are not allowed to apply to the support for artists and creative individuals grant. If you have 501c3 status, you could be eligible to apply for support for organizations, or some of our other grant programs that organizations can apply to. But again, you have to either have 501c3 status or be fiscally sponsored. If you are applying as an individual and you think that it is important to use your creative business as a means of displaying your creative work, I think that's a go. You can upload it as one of the links that you include with your work samples. We ask for like your social media handle, your website, your Twitter, and like your individual profile. And you can definitely use that as a means of being able to, again, to speak to your experience as a creative. The next question is, are there any reporting or accountability expectations for grant recipients? And we went over final reporting, so I'm hoping that might have answered that question for you. Great. How is this grant disbursement taxed? And are there resources available to help creative individuals navigate new tax situations? So we do give you a 1099 at the end of the year for you to be able to use for tax purposes if you are awarded a grant. So that's why we ask for that W-9 information, so that we can, come tax season, we can get you the 1099 that you might need to use for tax purposes. I will be honest, off the top of my head, I am not familiar with a resource that can help individuals navigate tax situations. I don't know if there's anybody on the team who might be aware of someone or an organization that might be able to help.
I do think that Fresh Arts has some resources on their website that touch on that a little bit. And I do think that they would also be a resource to reach out to. Yeah, the amount of tax that you pay, I mean, we are reporting it we are reporting it on our end. So the amount of tax you pay is probably going to depend on your overall income for the year.
Thank you, Mo. And is material work created with support from this grant able to be sold afterwards? Yes. Whatever you do with the work that you create, after the end of the grant term, you are free to do whatever you want to do with that work. Awesome. Thank you, Sonia. All right, who's next? Kara. Kara asked, what is an example of equipment that wouldn't be covered by a grant?
An example of an equipment that wouldn't be covered by the grant is let's say that you wanted to buy a $2,000 MacBook to assist you in going forward with your project. You wouldn't be able to buy the $2,000 MacBook. You'd be able to rent a laptop for $250. But like buying like a MacBook, or if you're going to film a screen, like film a movie that you're creating, you wouldn't be able to buy like a $1,000 projector to be able to project that like in a park or something, because the equipment would outlive the grant term, and it wasn't necessarily something that city funds would be able to cover. So those were like two examples of things that.
Okay, I'm thinking about that if my plan would be to produce a stage play. And so when you were mentioning equipment, I'm thinking about things like building a set. Obviously, like that's, I guess it's not equipment, but it would be products that would have to be bought, like wood panels and stuff to construct it. But that sounds like that's not falling into that category. Okay, thanks.
That was a great question. Thank you.
And it just to add to that as well, like it is also per item. So like, for example, you wouldn't spend, I think the most obvious example is like equipment or cameras or technical equipment, but like, for building a set, you probably wouldn't be spending, over $250 per item that you're purchasing. And then also like rental costs can be larger than the $250 as long as it's rented. It just can't be purchased. So the idea is that like, you're not buying things just for the grant that then, you can continue to kind of like have a life with afterwards. So like a film camera or something like that.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Can I chime in on her question just really quick?
Of course.